baklava. Now, I have had many people email me, ask me personally, tweet me, Insta me, all this stuff for a recipe for baklava. Now, I follow my parents' traditional recipe of baklava, so it's a little different to whatever else you've seen or you've learned. And mine's quite filling as well, because we're not going to be tight with this baklava. We're going to be very generous with it. What I have here today is phyllo pastry. I got cashews. Now, I purchased broken cashews. It is cheaper than buying whole cashews because you are going to blitz it up to a very fine powder. We got some plain flour, some sugar. I got some ghee melting on my stove. I like to use 100% pure ghee, and I'm very particular with what brands, either Asil or ghee. Now, if you don't have ghee and you can't find it, you can use unsalted butter, but we'll work with it. And if you do use unsalted butter, make sure you get the milk solids out before you go ahead and use it. I will let you know one thing though. I know I've spoken a lot now. This is a traditional recipe and I've been taught by sight, not by measurements. So you need to look carefully at this video. We're uploading a good quality one, so that way you'll be able to see everything. So first thing is 1 kilo of cashews. Straight in it goes. And make sure you get it into the RoboCoupe, not around it. Okay, and now to this, I'm going to add a sprinkle of flour. So you could say 1/4 cup of flour straight in here. Now the reason why I'm adding flour to this is going to help bind the nuts together to be nice and thick in the center without crumbling apart and falling apart everywhere. And to this, I'm going to add around 1/4 cup of sugar. Once again, for the binding process. We're not going to add eggs into this dish at all. Okay, lid on, and here we go. Okay, now if you take a look, this has been processing now for roughly 10 seconds. It looks quite fine in here, but it's still not. So as you can see, there's still some pieces in there. So I want it finer than this, and we're going to go finer. And finer. There we go. Sorry, Ruben, we're going again. Okay, so if you take a look now, you'll be able to grab this and give it a pinch in your hand, and it's going to form clumps. That's the type of consistency you want. If there's too much chunky pieces in there, it will not form this shape. So like I said, grab, pinch, get a couple of clumps, and you know it's right. Okay, we're going to leave these in here for now to work on this. Always have a damp cloth in your hand, handy, because working with phyllo pastry is not easy. It does dry up very quickly, and it will most likely dry up now because the window's open. So ghee is pretty much a clarified butter with no milk solids at all in there. So I'm going to get 1 ladle just to coat the bottom of your tray. And just swish that around. Now, I don't brush each layer of phyllo. I go by pouring method. It's what I was taught, and I'm going to teach you this today. And we're going to go 1 whole layer, carefully, straight underneath your tray. Now, depending on the size of your tray, depends on how many packets of phyllo you need. Now, I am making quite a large one, which will give me roughly 80 pieces of baklava. And we got 1 whole packet that we used under there. Yep. So the next part is your cashews. So straight in. So for me, what makes a good baklava is the generosity of the filling. You don't want too little because it'll be too dry, and you actually want to taste the cashews because that's what a baklava is. Now, if you wanted to use walnuts, exactly the same method applies, but blitz it up even finer than what we've done the cashews because walnuts are a little bit harder to bind together. Now, once it's in, give it a good press. Now, at this point, this is optional. I personally love a sprinkle of pine nuts on top because I find it adds an extra level of flavour. Today, we're going to go basic for you guys, and I'm not going to add the pine nuts. Now, to this, we're then going to get a good handful of flour, and we're going to do a very light sprinkle around the tray. What will the flour do is help caramelise the nuts in between, because you don't want to taste a raw flavored nut. You want it to be nice and caramelized. It'll bring out more oils, more fat, and more flavor. And to this, a nice handful of sugar as well to help with the caramelizing. Now in the recipe, I have put half a cup of flour, half a cup of sugar, but you'll be able to see how much you need just by exactly what I'm showing you now. All right, so spread that out evenly. Give it a push down. Okay, so this is the part you've got to work with it quickly. Phyllo dries out very quickly. Me personally, obviously, it's better to work somewhere where there's no window, but today we have to make do with what we have. And you've got to put a nice even layer around here. And now we're going for the second packet. And me patching it up means one more layer straight over this bit. And here you go. So for this tray, we've only used 3 packets of phyllo. If you were to make a round tray, you'll probably need a cut and add to be able to fit it into a round tray. Now I got carpal tunnel in my wrist, so I like to use small knives. It's very, very important, not only working fast, but you have a very sharp knife with you as well, because what you're going to do now is cut it into the desired shape you like, but you're going to make sure you cut it right down to the bottom of that tray. Make sure you tuck these edges in. Okay, so this is cut up. It still hasn't flaked away because we work nice and fast and we've used some elbow grease. Now I feel like I've got muscles. Okay, and now with the ghee. This is the part where measurements are hard. Generally I use around 500 grams of butter, but I'll go by ladle amounts. So what we're going to do is we're going to ladle each row with ghee. Now it's going to look like it's overflowing, but phyllo absorbs fat really, really, really well. And now what you're going to do is just tuck these edges in once again to make sure everything's in nice and neatly. Give it a little tiny flick on the side just to get some of that ghee going down. Now me generally, I just like to get the knife going down in certain spots where the butter is flowing over. Now if you allow this to stand for a few minutes, you'll find all the phyllo has absorbed the ghee or the unsalted butter. Now if it hasn't absorbed all of it and you've still got little bits scattering around like it is now, that means you have more than enough butter and do not need any more. But for the areas that have, which is for example this side, so this area here for me shows it needs a little bit more. And it saves you from brushing each layer by doing it this way. So a bit more in. So for a tray this size, I have used 500 grams of ghee. Okay. And in the oven it goes. You also have to make sure your oven colors underneath and on top at the same time, because you don't want it to be raw underneath and cooked on top, and you don't want it to be cooked underneath and raw on top. It'll kind of defeat the purpose. Baklava has to be perfect, golden and crisp all the way around. If only you could smell this. I tell you, phyllo and butter, match made in heaven. So this is the most important rule of all. Hot baklava to hot syrup. So I've got my sugar syrup boiling, which I'm going to bring it over now. Now with your sugar syrup, you're going to keep boiling it until just before it changes color. You don't want a toffee or a caramel. So we're going to keep boiling it until there's a slight, tiny little tinge of off-white in there, and then it'll be ready, because you need it to be nice and thick. Here we go, hot syrup, hot baklava. And once again, exactly like you've done with the butter, you're going to put ladles amount for each row, and you can see it all bubbling away. And yes, it's a lot of sugar, so I don't recommend more than 1 or 2 a night. Okay, now if you allow this to stand for a few minutes, you'll find it's already absorbing on the edges. So that's all taking it in. What I'm going to do is get a knife to do a quick test. What I'm going to do is just slightly poke it down just to make sure it is cut through right down to the tray, because there are some bits that may not have cut, like this one here. So you've got to make sure it's cut all the way through. Now you'll be able to tell now this side here, well obviously the side that I've poured first has absorbed all that syrup. So we're going to put another very small amount just on top to cover it. So not as much as you done in the beginning, just a little bit, just on those bits that it's already absorbed. So we've got this edge here. Now obviously the sugar syrup helps preserve it for a little longer time. It's not something you'd want to keep in the fridge because it'll go very, very hard. So you can keep it in an airtight container on your bench top and it will last, I'd say it'll give you easily 2 to 3 weeks in an airtight container with nothing going wrong. Now remember, there's no dairy products in it as well to worry. And that's it. This is the traditional Lebanese baklava. Last note, most important note as well, another one of the most important notes of baklava. You do not cut the tray, you do not take the baklava out until it completely cools. Me personally, I like to give it a good 8 hours or even overnight will be even better.